Actually, yes, I need my glasses. Hi there, this is Emily Craig, and I'm all hot and sticky because it's so expensive to run the air conditioning. But anyway, as you know, I live in Central California. And as you know, we have been hit with another spate of fires. And I will put the link down below that shows you how the fires were started by lightning. Okay, this is kind of an unusual experience in California. Unlike the East Coast, California thunder and lightning storms are very, very rare. And I lived here my whole life. All right. And so my former place of residence in Middletown is evacuated, and Hidden Valley Lake is evacuated, and there's fires up in Paradise and Oroville again. And so I have spent the day kind of hunkered down and dealing with the concept of apocalypse because there's just so much going on. And that drove me back to scripture because somebody has planned all of these events. They don't just happen by mistake. All right, they don't happen by mistake, and they don't happen accidentally. These events have to be planned. So I go back to Matthew chapter 24 and start with verse 36. Jesus is talking about how to know when it's time for an apocalypse reset. Now, there are two sites that I go to looking at our history revisited. One is New Earth, in which Sylvia shows the extent of the mud floods and the extent of stone technologies, particularly in Siberia and all over the world that kind of match. How does that work? Okay. And then Martin Leideke digs through engravings and old photographs and old maps and shows how there was a reset, and the mud flood got here and the mud flood got there. And so there have been partial resets like Sodom and Gomorrah, like Jericho, okay? There have been cities, I think there are 15 cities that are under 30 meters of water all over the world that all of a sudden were drowned at one time. All right. But does that mean, like the flood of Noah's day, that everybody gets taken out at once? That was my question that brought me to this scripture, and here it is. Concerning that day and hour, nobody knows, neither the angels of the heavens, nor the Son, but only the Father. For just as the days of Noah were, so the presence of the Son of Man will be. For as they were in those days before the flood, eating and drinking, men marrying, and women being given in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark. And they took no note until the flood came and swept them all away. So the presence of the Son of Man will be. Then two men will be in the field. One will be taken along and the other be abandoned. Two women will be grinding at the handmill. One will be taken along and the other be abandoned. Keep on the watch, therefore, because you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. All right. So there are two people working at the mill, and one of them succumbs to the reset and the other one doesn't. Well, that means that for the resets that Jesus is referring to, there are people left over. And so the reset is partial. Now, we know from Martin Leideke's work and some of the other history buffs that the 1800s, it was sometime between 1812 and 1840, there was this horrific mud flood. And then in the 1850s, there were the orphan trains. And then in the 1860s, there was a civil war, maybe. All right, that's how they've written it up. Okay. In 1834, there was the Indian Removal Act and also the Verona Treaty. These are things that are showing us who's in power. The Verona Treaty, if you would look that up, is a tyrannical document, very much like the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. There were some elitists, there were some rich folks manipulating in the church and in the Masonic orders and so on, who were meddling. Well, they were the winners, and so they wrote the history. All right. And so the mud flood didn't cover the entire world. People lived through it. The war of 1812 was actually the first world war because it was Bonaparte against Britain and against Russia and against, the rest of the world. World War I, okay, was staged by Alfred Pike, Grand Commander of the Masons, Scottish Rite, okay, and he wrote to his doctor friend Manzini and said that we're going to stage 3 world wars. Well, that's an apocalyptic intention. So World War I formed an apocalyptic reset in which most of the monarchies of Northern Europe were affected very badly. All right, we'll put it that way. And World War II was kind of a continuation of World War I. World War III, according to Albert Pike, is supposed to be the Christians against the Islamists, wiping each other out so that the Zionists are the only ones left. Well, I question that. I question a lot of things. But the point I got out of this was that the rapture or the Armageddon, or, these scriptures in Matthew and Revelation are not clearly understood. And they may have applied to several incidents over the past 1,000 years. It wouldn't surprise me. And it may have something to do with some of the horrific disasters that we are experiencing now. Look what's happening to California by fire, and look what's happening to China by flood. There are also terrible floods in Pakistan and United Arab Republic. Okay, disasters happen here and there, as in Sodom and Gomorrah and, Jericho. So it's possible that who's ever staging this apocalypse has the intention that there are going to be people who get through it. It's not going to be a clean off the chalkboard kind of series of events. People will be left. And that means that the people who intend to be left have to give this some thought. How to be left? Oh, there's a scripture that says, when Jerusalem is surrounded by stakes, head for the mountains. Okay. Well, I think Jerusalem has been surrounded by stakes for a long time. And there are certainly a lot of people heading for the rural areas in the countryside. People are also mobilizing in new ways that I see all over YouTube, okay? Now it's a fashionable thing. It's the latest fashion to get yourself a truck or an old trailer or an RV and fix it out so you can live in it full time, okay? An interesting thought, but it certainly does get rid of the mortgage payments, okay? It gets rid of the county taxes, but it is a lot of wear and tear on the body. I did that for 6 months back in 1997, and even then it was very, very strenuous for a single woman like me. So that's one thing that people are doing. And so let's think about, okay, if we're going to get through this apocalypse, which may be selective, Notice China, which is experiencing horrific flooding, is also a nation that is known to be totalitarian and very harsh against its own citizens. How about that? And United Arab Republic, that's been flooded and hit with ice and storms and snow and crickets and locusts, is also known to be very, very hard on its people. How about that? So the United States, which with its National Security Council has been conducting regime change and serial wars and commercial contract, defense contract wars for the past half a century, better think about their karma and what they expect to come back as blowback, okay? Particularly since, all right, the treaties that they have signed since Eisenhower signed the Greada Treaty, and Dan Borish was involved in the Tau 9 that Bush signed, those are all maritime admiralty treaties that have no sense, no concept of human rights. So how do we reestablish and restore the common law human rights that we had in the 1689 Bill of Rights in England and in the 1789 Constitution in the United States? How do we establish those rights again? Now, I don't know. It seems to me that if governments are running on maritime admiralty impersonal commercial statutes, the only way people have any human rights would be if they established a community in which they had a condominium set of relational, you can call them rules or guideposts, but basically, if my mother's condo document was 250 pages, and it was all about nobody can do any harm to anybody else, which is the essence of common law, okay. So it could be that the best we're going to be able to do to come out of this instant apocalypse is to establish cultural communities and confederations of groups of communities so that people have a sense of culture. Otherwise, culture is being eradicated by the nanny state. And I'm really offended by the nanny state because who wants to live that way? Who wants to live as a cog in a wheel in a dystopia? I don't know of anybody who does. So at this point in my life, you know, my life is over. My life is over. I have no options. And so I do this for my children and my grandchildren and their children, because I don't want my kids to be enslaved the way I have been and the way this immediate generation is about to be sucked into and chipped and treated like cattle. I'm not about to have it. One of the things you need to think about is that Virginia is already talking about mandatory vaccination of everybody, and that's a blue state. If you're against mandatory vaccination, you need to think about moving to a red state, okay? Because I live in, you know, California is a blue state and the governor's very extreme leftist. And so I can expect that kind of unreasonable governmental overreach to try to get a hold of my body, and it's not going to happen. So we have to think about what our options really are. We have to mobilize to the extent that is practical and financially doable. And we have to find a way to associate with people. Of course, the internet facilitates a lot of that. I've found some wonderful friends on the internet. Associate with the people that make sense to you. so that when you have a community and you agree on how you're going to live in community, that's probably going to be the best shot at freedom that maybe we're even going to get. I don't know. So these are some thoughts I wanted to give you about this apocalypse that's staring us in the face, and the affirmation that some people are going to get through it, and we might as well be the ones who do. And so let's proceed with getting through a very tough time. And this has been Emily Windsor Craig, and the British Empire sure ain't what it used to be. And America, I don't know if America's going to be able to restore its any stature of respect and integrity, since it's been very corrupt for almost 200 years. But we'll see how much progress President Trump can make in that direction. And so we'll see you guys next time. This has been Emily Craig. Bye-bye.